Hi, I'm Marty Nemko. Recognizing my advanced age, I'm going to be 70 in June, a reader asked me what has changed over my lifetime. Let's start with technology. Of course, technology has dramatically affected our lives. For space, I'll just focus on one thing, something personal, my writing. I first wrote on a typewriter. Changes were laborious, requiring white-out liquid, penciling arrows on sections that needed moving, retyping pages, and publication meant mailing a hard copy, and thus would begin a year or more between the book's submission and publication. It was obsolete before it was published. The research required many trips to libraries, often to find that what I wanted wasn't there. Now, my most recent book, Careers for Dummies, thanks to the internet, word processing, and email, incorporated massively more and more on-target research. Yet the book was on the shelves for you just 3 months after submission. My Psychology Today articles, thanks to word processing and with internet research so available, means I can write a publishable article in a few hours. It's posted the second I've finished editing it, and after publication I can make additional tweaks, which appear instantly. Now let's turn to changes in romantic relationships. When I was growing up, most adults were married, and at least publicly heterosexual. Premarital sex was not often publicly discussed. Today, of course, much has changed. Living together prior to or instead of marriage is the norm. Homosexuality is often proudly proclaimed. Also, when housing and higher education were more affordable, one person, usually the man, was the breadwinner, and the other partner, usually the woman, was in a primary charge of homemaking and parenting. Now, both partners are more likely to work outside the home, and while women still do more of the domestic activity, men do much more than they used to. Women are much more assertive about their sexual desires than in past generations. Let's turn to parenting. Corporal punishment was common when I was growing up. I was a personal recipient. Less so now, at least among educated people. After school, kids were allowed to play without supervision. Now, parental fears for kids' safety, or at least of appearing to be an irresponsible parent, has resulted in heavily scheduling kids' after-school time in supervised activities. Turning to recreation. When I was growing up, most Major League Baseball players stayed with one team for their entire career, so it was easier to care about the team. Now, there's free agency, in which a player is free to go to any other team who will pay more. It's harder for a fan to be loyal to a team when its players aren't loyal. Also, there were far fewer commercials, so watching a baseball, basketball, or football game typically took around 2 hours. Now it's more than 3. When I was growing up, the recreational sports of choice included such activities as bowling and stickball. Now, those have largely been replaced by the likes of soccer and rock climbing. Turning to religion. Religiosity was normative. Most people regularly went to church or synagogue and sent their kids for religious training. That's declining today. Spirituality is increasingly manifested in Eastern-derived meditation, yoga, and Buddhism. Food. Eating was different. Diets were meat-centric and more calorific. Today, at least among the middle class, diets are more likely to be lower calorie, vegetarian, and even vegan. Meals were longer affairs. I don't mean to say they were purely vegetarian or vegan, but there's ever more focus on the vegetables than on meat. Anyway, today, grab and go is increasingly common. Food has become political. Local, sustainable, organic, and fair trade are widely seen as politically correct. Turning to work. When I was growing up, most jobs were full-time, benefited, and relatively stable. Today, ever more jobs are short-term, if not part-time, temp, with people hired on a just-in-time basis. That's more efficient, but if and when the current economic boom fades, it could result in larger structural unemployment, with serious sequelae for individuals, family, and society. Housing. The single-family, white picket fence suburban home was core to the American dream. That's increasingly replaced by apartment and condo urban living. Egalitarianism. When I was growing up at the tail end of the Sputnik era, the term best and brightest was the phrase governing who should get the most resources. Today, that's being significantly replaced with egalitarianism. We're more likely to venerate phrases such as community rather than neighborhood, we than I. Terms like best and brightest, hierarchy, and even competition are more likely to be disparaged than are equality, teamwork, inclusion, collaboration, and for all. Environmentalism. When I was growing up, real estate development was viewed as a positive. Today it's often viewed as environmentally fraught. America took pride in building roads to keep up with its growing population, thereby avoiding traffic jams. But today, governmental and activist consensus is that it's worth putting people in traffic in hopes of controlling the planet's climate, even as China, for example, just announced that it's building coal-fired power plants that will produce more carbon emissions than does the entire EU. And finally, let's turn to education. Today's schools reflect the above changes, the changes I've been talking about here. Ability group classes are largely replaced by egalitarian mixed ability classes. The underpinning of most education conferences today is all students can learn to high standards. School funding formulas give low-income school districts more money. Much schoolwork is now done in teams. The curriculum emphasizes environmentalism and inclusion. Academic standards have been ratcheted up so that everyone, starting in kindergarten, is taught the Common Core curriculum. You might want to Google Common Core curriculum and you'll see how rigorous, perhaps, and if I may say so, arcane and irrelevant to most people's lives much of it is. The most popular article on psychology today is Kindergarten Teachers Are Quitting, and here is why. It's all about the focus on academics. I found the comments from kindergarten teachers particularly eye-opening. You really will find it interesting to read. Also, it's now a presumption that it's wise for a much higher percentage of high school graduates to go on to college, rather than in vocational programs such as an apprenticeship. Now some, but not all people, view these changes as progress. But in any event, these changes don't appear to be pendulums, but trends likely to increase as we enter the 2020s. What do you think? I welcome your comments below. Certainly your thumbs up, but also your thumbs down if you deem appropriate. I love it if you hit the share button and share on your social media and or subscribe to my channel. In any event, I do thank you for watching. I am Marty Nemko.